You guys, welcome to another episode of Ask Alex, where this is the show where I take all your questions and answer them here on this show. And today I have a special interview that I've been wanting to do for the last few weeks. This guy has been on Collider Heroes. He's been on the Schmoedown, and he's also a frequent regular on Jon Schnepp's show, the Jon Schnepp Show. I would love to introduce you guys to one of my favorite commentators, Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett. How are you doing today, Robert?
Well, hey man, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. I mean, cross country like this, I love what technology, how it can bring us all together.
I know, right? Like it's odd that I'm all the way here in Florida and you're in Los Angeles and we get to do this.
It's crazy, but isn't it? I mean, I think that's what technology is for. That's the best thing is it can bring literally people from around the planet together instantaneously, which I love.
Yo, and I love that too, because what's funny? I started doing this probably around 2016, and I never thought I'd get a chance to interview you, and I've been following you since the AMC days, so it's just like, wow.
I know, I was on like the 6th episode of Collider Heroes. That's when I started, which was 4 years ago.
Yeah, and it's just amazing of all the work that you've done. But Robert, why don't you tell us how you got started in this business? Because I know you've done this professionally. Like, I know you've worked on movies like Superman Returns and some Star Trek stuff. So tell us how you got started.
Well, it goes way back. I mean, I always wanted to make movies from the time I was a little kid. And I grew up in Seattle, and Seattle had one of the first video stores in the United States. And I started hanging out there when I was like 13 years old. Like, I would literally just show up and rifle. There weren't very many movies available back then. And I would rifle through what was there. I'd seen them all 100 times, but I would just be like, wow, there's movies. Like, you could pick up, people don't remember that. It was a long time ago. Imagine not being able to get any movies, and every movie you had was like a precious resource. And I started working at a video store when I was 13. I shouldn't have been. They gave me a job because I hung around. Then I wrote a newspaper. I had a high school newspaper column where I reviewed movies and things like that. And I was just always in love with film. And then I went to school in my home state of Washington at the Evergreen State College. And then I transferred to USC. And right out of college, my first job was I was the art department production assistant on Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. And it was my first time on a set. And then I worked my way up through the industry for a long time. I wanted to make my first movie when I was 30. That was my goal. And I worked for both CAA and William Morris as a script reader. I worked for Full Moon Entertainment, working on movies like Arcade, we made the Subspecies movies and the Doll Man movies. And I worked there. And I started editing music videos and then low budget feature films. And in '99, my first movie that I wrote and directed came out, which was called Free Enterprise, that stars William Shatner and Eric McCormack. And then it didn't really do very well. And then I fell into the DVD world, and I started producing DVD special edition special features. I worked on the Lord of the Rings movies. I worked on the 20th anniversary of Tron, which I made an hour and a half making of documentary. Worked on Chronicles of Narnia, Superman Returns, X-Men, and X2. Most recently, I worked on all the special features on the high-def remaster of Star Trek The Next Generation, which you can now get in the box set. We did about 50 hours of documentaries on that. And then what I've been doing lately is, for the last 4 years, I've gone back to editing feature films. I edited a low-budget science fiction thriller that's on Netflix now called Paradox. And I'm in the middle of producing and editing a low-budget feature called Tango Shalom right now. So as a matter of fact, I'm preparing the last reels. It's a 6-reel film. Each reel's 20 minutes. So I'm doing reels 5 and 6 to turn over to my colorist, who does all the final color timing. And then the sound mixer gets it all tomorrow. So I finally get to push it off. But yeah, I've been involved in the online pundit community since 2015 because Jon Schnepp asked me to, the late great Jon Schnepp, and I've been going to Comic-Con since 1988, and I've just been in the geek sphere most of my life, so I can't escape.
It's so funny that you bring up Jon Schnepp. He's actually why I kind of started doing this. I've been following him since there's this show in LA called Clever Movies. There was a show they did a segment called It's a Wrap. And the first time I saw him is he was on the show talking about Guardians of the Galaxy, and
Oh, wow.
he was talking about his movie he was doing, Death of Superman Lives.
Yeah.
And you know, right then and there is when I got introduced to the AMCs, and then eventually turned into Collider, and it was because of him. And I really do thank God for him, that he basically gave me my voice to do what I'm currently doing now. And I wanted to ask you, you know, because I know you guys were close. I know you guys hung out on and off set and worked on projects together. I just want to know, like, were you guys ever planning on doing like your own Robert and Jon show, you know, or
we
something
were.
of that
As a
nature?
matter of fact, we were in the planning stages of that when he passed away. Jon wanted to leave Collider and do his own thing. And we were talking about we were going to do a show that we were going to shoot at the American Cinematheque, the Egyptian Theater in Hollywood, where we would take like a genre of film, like say vampire movies. And then we would look at like, we'd pick 3 vampire movies, like a vampire movie that was made in the 50s, and a vampire movie that was made in the 70s, and a vampire movie that was made in the 90s, and sort of discuss the genre by using, say, 3 movies from that genre of film, and then compare and contrast them. So we wanted to make what's called an evergreen show, which means it never goes out of style. Like you can tune in whenever, and it's not topical. So it's not, you know, in 5 years, no one's going to be talking about Endgame and what it was like to come out. So when you watch these old shows, I mean, they might have historical significance, but we wanted to take a look back at classic cinema that was always going to be there, and talk about it, because Jon and I were huge genre fans, and we were talking about doing other things as well, but that was the show we'd been talking about the most. And he was building sort of a home studio where we were going to shoot these things. And you know, now it's been fun, because when after Jon Schnepp passed away, and John Campea called me and said, maybe we should do a show. And obviously I started out on the AMC Heroes when it was John Campea and Jon Schnepp. So I go all the way back to when I first started on YouTube, all the way back 4 years in ancient history. But it was great. And so we've been doing that ever since, and it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny, I watch it every week. Like, I just watched you guys today, and you guys tackle a lot of interesting topics. But the one thing I love about the Jon Campion show, how it's evolved now, is that, you know, Robert, I'm not saying you're like the anti-Jon Campea, but but there are things that you guys talk about that, you know, you don't necessarily agree, which I find very balanced, because I didn't want, you know, the show to be like, you know, you agree with everything that Jon says and vice versa. Like today, you guys were talking about the whole Gambit thing, and you were basically saying, you know, like, listen, this is how I feel about it, and I don't think I mean, with the whole Disney taking over Fox and stuff, like, I don't think that it's a dependent upon Disney to do a Gambit movie. And it was actually really cool to see you guys battle against, or not necessarily battle, but debate amongst each other. And I wanted to know, how did you guys establish that type of chemistry when you came on to do a show?
You know, that's a good question. I think it just kind of happened organically. I mean, the one thing about what I don't understand about online discourse is, growing up as a geek, I would go to conventions my whole life, and you'd have these long conversations with people, but they were face to face. And you'd have the most geeky discussions ever. Like, well, you know, could the Enterprise destroy an Imperial Star Destroyer with all of its TIE fighters and stuff? And you get to these ridiculous hour-long conversations about these topics, but because you were standing in front of somebody, it was always respectful. Like, you would never, like, you dickhead or whatever. It never devolved into name calling. You know, and I think that Jon and I have a healthy respect for one another. We come from different places. I mean, he's had a movie blog in one way, shape, or form for a lot longer than I've been in the online or YouTube space. So, you know, I've learned a lot from him. He knows a lot about setting up your own YouTube channel. I started my own channel, the Burnett Work. It's only like 3 months old, but I've been doing these live shows, and I learned a lot from Jon, and he knows that I've done things that he hasn't done, and he's done things that I haven't done. So I think when we get together, a lot of the time I do agree with him, but if I don't agree with him, I can disagree, and he doesn't get angry. You know, we have a conversation, and I was used to that growing up. Like, I don't understand how acrimonious fandom has become. Like, it really freaked me out during Gamergate. Like, I was like a kid that, like, I went to comic book stores every week and I went to conventions. I'm like, where are the girls at? You know, what was up with that? And or where was anybody? I mean, the first time I got propositioned by a dude, I was at a science fiction convention, and I mean, I'm straight, but I didn't get angry. You know, he and I had this mutual respect. The guy hit on me. I said, well, you know, I'm not gay, but I appreciate the fact that you liked me and thought I was handsome or whatever. And we hung out for the rest of the time at the convention. I mean, it was not a problem, you know, and we don't have to get angry with people. And I think being a science fiction, fantasy, and horror fan, I sort of grew up in a world where anybody who was a fellow fan, I was respectful of. Like, we had a baseline of always, we like the same stuff. And if we like the same stuff, despite our differences, whether it's religious differences, whether it's racial differences, whether it's sexuality differences, whatever our differences are, we still all like science fiction, fantasy, and horror. So that's our common ground. You know, and when we would go talk about this stuff, it's like, well, we all love it. So why are we not nice to each other? And that to me was just sort of, well, I grew up in a household where I never heard my mom and dad say an unkind word about anybody. You know, they sort of instilled in me the idea that you always have to be respectful of your fellow human being until such time as they do something where you can disrespect them. But then instead of, you know, don't be a douche, just don't deal with them anymore. And I sort of was raised that way. And I'd like to think, I mean, I'm really, it makes me happy that you point out that John and I have a rapport where we can disagree with one another, because that keeps, one, the show interesting, but two, there's no reason why we can't disagree with each other and be civil about it. And I think that's important. And especially in the online space, why not be? How hard can it be? You know, and when you have to deal with people face to face, it's a whole different thing than when you're sitting behind your keyboard and screw you, you know.
You know, when you did that, that reminded me of Schnepp, where he would be just like this.
Oh yeah, he always. That used to crack me up when John did that. That was my favorite. I love that.
Oh man, that man will truly, definitely be missed. And it's funny that you bring that up, because on the show today, you guys were actually talking about this discourse between the DC and Marvel, you know, fanboys, whatever fandom. And basically, you know, you guys were talking about basically one of the producers of Shazam saying, you know, it's cool to be a fan of both genres. Me personally, I'm a huge comic book fan of all different walks of life, you know. And I feel as though as a fan, we should be uniting, not fighting against one another. It's cool to have debates, but like, for me to say evil things about Marvel, kind of dumb and redundant. And I wanted to ask you, because you guys do this almost 5 days a week, almost every day. How do you guys deal with that? You know, that toxic, you know, those toxic tweets from people who really just don't matter or have lives.
Well, I mean, you know, I look at it as it's a sort of a, you have to, I have a thick skin. I just let it roll off of me. And I think to myself, as a geek, and I consider myself a geek, we live in a wonderful time right now. We're getting Endgame. We're getting The Expanse. We're getting Game of Thrones. We're getting Star Wars. We're getting Shazam. We're getting Hellboy. I mean, in the month of April, you got Shazam, Hellboy, Game of Thrones, and Endgame coming out in a month. Like, never in my wildest dreams would I have thought we're living in this time. And I just don't understand why people are mad. I mean, I don't like every genre thing that comes out, but I was never a Pokemon fan, but I want to go see Detective Pikachu. Yeah. It looks funny. Like, you know, we're getting an embarrassment of riches. Now, I do think what's changed is, I say on my own show that we live in the post-geek singularity. And what I mean by that is everyone's a geek now. Everybody likes some form, whether it's Thrones, whether it's the MCU, whatever it is. Before, I felt I was in a minority of one growing up. I was the only kid I knew that loved this stuff, and I was kind of in the closet about it because nobody else wanted to hear it. They all knew I was a fan. Nobody cared. But like if there was a hot Hollywood party going on, or there was somebody showing a marathon of Star Trek movies at the local theater, well, I'd go to that marathon of Star Trek movies at the local theater and get the next party. It's like, so we live in this time where I think that we're getting all this great stuff, but I understand, like before, you had George Lucas was a man with an idea, which was Star Wars, and he has to go to a studio and he has to beg them for money. He went to Universal, who he'd made American Graffiti for. They didn't want to make Star Wars. He made him a ton of money with American Graffiti. They didn't want to make Star Wars, so Lucas had to go find the money. Well, and so it's the filmmaker, and then it's the studio. Well, now it's flipped. Now Disney owns Star Wars, and they have to figure out which filmmaker is going to work with them and for them, and are they going to make Star Wars as a 4-quadrant product? They still want a good filmmaker, but the whole reason behind making the movie is for Disney to make money so their shareholders know they're turning a profit. Filmmakers, of course, you dream of making movies or dream of making money, but what you really want to do is make the film. And I think most filmmakers, if they could survive, like, look, everybody wants to get rich. I get it. But I think filmmaking, like any art form, if you're a true filmmaker, you just want to make your movie. You're not thinking, like George Lucas didn't think Star Wars was going to become Star Wars when he made it. And now, it's 40 years later, 42 years later, he sold it to Disney for $4 billion. Well, Disney doesn't care about, oh, yes, we have to make more Star Wars. They have to make money, and they've got to make $1 billion on their movies. So, of course, the very essence, the soul, if you will, of Star Wars is no longer pure. It's now a product, and it's only a product, where before with a filmmaker, like I always use the example of Ryan Coogler, who made Black Panther. I love what he did with Creed, because Ryan Coogler was a huge Rocky fan. I heard him on, I think it was on NPR when he was talking about how his mother was dying of cancer. And him and his father and him would watch the Rocky movies to make themselves feel better. And it was something they did together, and they bonded over it. And he became a huge Rocky fan. So he makes Fruitvale Station, which is a great indie movie. Then he comes up with this idea, like, I'm going to make a new Rocky sequel where I'm going to deal with Adonis Creed. I mean, that was insane for him to come up with that idea, but he'd already made a film. And he's like, I could go make any movie, but what I want to do is I want to make a new Rocky sequel. And like the balls on that kid. Like he makes Fruitvale Station, and then he contacts Sylvester Stallone because he has some indie credibility. Can you imagine? You go to the guy who created Rocky, and you're like, hi, I know you don't know me, but I'd like to make a Rocky movie, and I want you to play the supporting role, not the lead role. I mean, I think about that, but because he loved Rocky so much, I look at Creed and I'm like, that's like a perfect sequel. Stallone gets his Oscar nomination. It was made by a new up-and-coming filmmaker who loved the franchise, who loved Rocky, understood the essence of the franchise, created a new character that still is canonical, ties back to Rocky canon, fits right in. You get Michael B. Jordan, one of the most exciting young actors around, who I've loved since, I don't know, The Wire and Friday Night Lights. And you cast him. What a great casting coup. And you go and you make a movie because you love it. Like, he made Fruitvale Station. He could have gone and made some incendiary social justice movie and probably got a lot more credibility, but no, for a second movie, he wants to do a Rocky film. And that's an amazing example of watching a franchise that's been around for 40 years plus. You get a filmmaker who wants to work in that space and makes a big hit, becomes a new industry powerhouse, and gets to make Black Panther, which is the best of both worlds. He brings his indie sensibility to a $150 million franchise project. How amazing is that? Now, I think what we want is, we want filmmakers who love Star Wars that can work within the confines of Star Wars, but unfortunately, unlike Rocky, there's so much money tied up in Disney. $4 billion has to be repaid, and all the interest they had to borrow, whatever. So I get it, but Star Wars is no longer ever going to be basically the prequels, whether you like them or not, are still indie movies. George Lucas paid for them all.
Right.
It's his. I think that they're not good movies, but I think they're good Star Wars. The story's there, the world is there. The movies are just not good. But all the Star Wars of it, I really like. And it was still brought to you by the man who created it. But now Star Wars is just a product to be made. And I understand the anger. I have that same anger with Star Trek. Star Trek, they're cranking it out, and the people don't exactly have an affinity for it. I wish there was a Ryan Coogler who would come along who loves Star Trek and convinced Paramount to make a Star Trek movie. I mean, it was crazy to me when J.J. Abrams, who now everyone loves because of The Force Awakens, he was making Star Trek, for me, my religion, basically. And every time he was in an interview, would be like, I never liked Star Trek. It was too smart. I was a Star Wars guy. And I'm like, then why are you directing a Star Trek movie? Why are you doing that? So anyway, but I think I understand the divisiveness amongst the fan base. But look, I mean, I'm not saying you have to eat all shovel whatever's put in front of you, but sometimes you're going to get a Rogue One, and a lot of people like Force Awakens, and I think there's going to be some good Star Wars movies and some not so good Star Wars movies. I think Solo is a lot better than people give it credit for, but did we need that movie? Maybe not. I mean, when I saw the picture of Billy D. Williams as Lando yesterday, I was like, bring that shit on. I can't wait to see Billy D. Williams come back as Lando. It's about time. Why was he not in The Force Awakens? They better have a good reason. I mean, he's still rocking. Lando is still rocking the capes, and that's all I care about.
It's funny that you said I was having that same conversation with one of my friends who does the same thing that we do. And I love the Star Wars franchise from I wasn't born when it came out, but when my dad used to love Star Wars and Star Trek. Like right now, like my dad to this day still has the original VHSs of the Star Trek series with Patrick Stewart and the original Captain Kirk.
Yeah, William Shatner.
And he still has the original trilogy, or not trilogy, but the four episode movies of Star Wars. Or sorry, it is the trilogy. Episode 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah.
So I watched those, and I really like episode 4 more than Empire. I understand why people like Empire more,
right?
But I really enjoyed episode 4. I don't know. There's something about it that I really enjoyed about it. So, and I remember as a fan that's growing into this, because I'm not like a huge Star Wars fan, but
sure,
when I would watch you guys talk about how the different worlds that there are to Star Wars and the different books and all this other stuff. I remember when they did the Star Wars Force Awakens when it was first coming out, and I remember like it was clear as day. AMC, I think it was still AMC at the time. They were talking about the trailer and how George Lucas basically sold all this stuff to Disney, and I didn't realize how strong of a fandom it was. And then when I went to go see it, because I took my dad to go see it, my dad was actually in tears to see it because he thought that in his lifetime he would never see another Star Wars movie.
Right.
And for me, it was like, wow, like for something to see that from my dad, it was just mind blowing. So, and even for me, when I saw Black Panther, I was in tears to see a movie that was heavily representation of me and people who identify with Black Panther. So I wanted to ask you, because you've worked on Star Trek, you've worked on Superman Returns. I wanted to ask you, how important is it to be a part of something of that and make sure that it solidifies all the fandom that's a part of those particular, genres?
Well, I think, everybody who works in that space is always trying to make the best movie possible. Mm-hmm. And I think that everybody's trying as hard as they can. Now, you have to understand when you're making movies, there's a lot, especially studio movies at that level. First of all, studios don't just have, contrary to popular belief, millions and millions of dollars sitting in a bank account that's just waiting for them to spend this money. Mm-hmm. They have to borrow money from banks. So there's interest payments they're making, because to make a film, you have to have liquid cash. You have to be able to pay people. You can't do it on credit. You're every week somebody gets a paycheck. And when you have a movie, you're making a movie like Black Panther or Superman Returns, there's thousands of people that need to get paid. So it's a very expensive proposition. Mm-hmm. And as soon as the movie comes out, they have to start paying back the bank payments that they've made. And So everybody's trying to make the best movie that they can make.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another thing to me. I think it's really important for when filmmakers, they're keenly aware that they have a fan base out there. They are trying. No filmmakers like, screw the fans. I can make whatever movie I want. They don't want to do that. Like the great thing about what I love about the MCU is the MCU is sort of the perfect synergy between the studio interests, the Marvel Studios and Disney as well. And then they make these hires where they hire Kevin Feige's been very smart. He'll go get indie filmmakers like James Gunn or the Russo brothers, pulling them out of episodic television. And he sees something in their ability to tell a story that other studios would never have given the Russo brothers Captain America, the Winter Soldier. They would have been like, no, we're not going to give those guys that. What have they done? Community episodes or whatever? No. And yet Kevin Feige can see something in them, and they're working for the greater good. The Russos know they're working within the MCU. James Gunn knew he's working with them within the MCU. Taika Waititi had made 2 other previous What We Do in the Shadows and the Wilder People movie that he did. 2 movies that aren't huge budget films, but he demonstrated a point of view and really interesting point of view. And Kevin Feige taps Taika Waititi to direct Thor. They're trying to make the best movies that they can. Sometimes, it doesn't work, but it's funny to me. I look at a movie like Black Panther, and in terms of representation, what's so interesting to me about Black Panther was it was the best kind of representation in that what was going on was organic to the story. No one said, well, it's time that we make a black superhero film to appeal to black audiences. No, they had a character, Black Panther, that had been around for more than 50 years, created by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, created by the great those great creators back in the 60s. And they introduced the character, they introduced T'Challa in Civil War, and they get one of the great actors of his generation, Chadwick Boseman, to play the character, and he's great. And immediately it's like, we love this character, we love his performance. You can't have a white director come in and direct a Black Panther movie. You just can't. I was arguing last night on my own show. Jordan Peele made these comments in a Hollywood Reporter article the other day. He said, listen, I am not going to make a movie where I have a white dude as the protagonist in one of my horror films. He's like, I've seen that movie before. Like, I've seen how many horror movies have I seen with the white dude as the protagonist? Well, Jordan Peele is like, he's a black man. He's had the experience of growing up a black American. He has a different perspective. So of course he's going to make a movie about a black family, and how about a normal black family like he has in Us? Now, a lot of people wrote to me and said, well, this was terrible. He's racist. I'm like, no, he's not racist. And somebody pointed out to me, like, if I was a white guy and I was going to make a movie about a woman going through menopause, I perhaps might not be the best person to direct that movie. You might want to have a woman who's gone through menopause to bring her unique insight into that film. And what's so great about Black Panther is it's the African nation of Wakanda, and it deals obliquely with elements of colonialism and what the black experience has been, not just in America, but across the world. And that's, they're making a movie about a superhero in their fictional country of Wakanda that's the most technologically advanced on Earth. However, because it's got a predominantly black cast, especially in America, there are issues that go along with the representation there. There's a whole 14% of the United States is African American, just shy of. When have they ever had a $150 million franchise film property that predominantly stars black Americans? Never. Like never. And isn't it great that we have that movie? And they're not beating you over the head with some racial message. It's not an issue. But the fact that you have so many great African American actors. I mean, come on, Angela Bassett, Hubba Hubba, yes,
yeah,
and Lupita Nyong'o, and I mean everybody. I think Lupita Nyong'o is one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen, like ever in my life. But so having these kinds of movies is important. But it's also important to be true to the characters and be true to where they come from. If they had made some, Black Panther doesn't have to be directly about race to still be a movie that's addressing racial issues, which I think is brilliant. That's the best kind of representation. I mean, really, it's really the struggle between the old ways and the new ways, and someone who's been a victim. Eric Killmonger was actually a victim from what happened with his family. I mean, Wakanda is kind of to blame for where Killmonger came from, and it's also like, what responsibility do we have as a society to take care of people? And even though it's about Wakanda and you're watching a movie in a fictional context about a superhero, that's how you're best dealing with those kinds of issues. You know, and it's important that we have those kinds of issues. Now you have people bitching about Captain Marvel, and it's like, what? Like, why are you bitching about Captain? We're getting a Captain Marvel movie. You're complaining because Brie Larson wanted to have more female critics come. I mean, look, I look at my YouTube analytics. 98.9% of my audience on YouTube are dudes. I've got, according to my YouTube analytics, 1.1% of girls, female. If only for my live chat stream, I would love it if more girls would come watch my channel, because it would add more different viewpoints. Different points of view are important, and why not be more inclusive in terms of, I mean, I'm a fan of not just, I want all human beings from people. I get people from all over the world coming into my chats, and it just makes them better. Why we're all afraid of each other, like, oh, my way of life is going to be swept away when all the immigrants cross our southern border. And I'm thinking to myself, no, they're not. You know, somebody might open a restaurant that's in your neighborhood that you might really like. It'll be your favorite Mexican restaurant, just like when the Italians immigrated to New York. We got some better food in this country. I mean, it's so incredible to me that we are always so worried, like, oh my God, we're always worried about whoever's taking whatever away from us. It's always couched as a bad thing. And I'm like, you know what? The more people, you talk about those people coming from Central America who walked here. They freaking walked. I'm thinking to myself, you know what? If anyone's going to walk thousands of miles from their home country to come to America, those are the people I want in this country. Those are people that are going to be motivated. Those are people that are going to want to work hard. They're going to start businesses, and they want to do the same thing we want to do, take care of their kids, put a roof over their heads. I mean, what's wrong with that? That's how this country was built. It's just people were coming from different places. We've had waves of immigrants, you know, after the Irish potato famine. Then the Irish were people that were made fun of, like in New York. Then there's the Italians, and then there's the Poles. I mean, then the Chinese, and everybody. I mean, it's just crazy to me. You know where it all leads? Good food. Every immigrant culture that comes to America has brought their own restaurants with them, and we benefit. So, I mean, that's kind of the way I think about it. And now we have an embarrassment of riches, whether it's comic books, board games, television shows. I mean, we have an Umbrella Academy series on Netflix. That's crazy. That is crazy, but we have it. You know, there's season 3 of Runaways. We got Cloak and Dagger coming back. I mean, why is everyone so angry? We live in wondrous times. We got Endgame. I can't even believe Endgame's coming out.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah. And everyone's angry. Like, let me just bitch and moan about the new Star Wars movie. Well, you know what? I'd rather have a Star Wars movie to bitch and moan about than have no Star Wars movie at all. I mean, it's just crazy.
Right.
It's crazy.
Right. You know, oh my God, like I almost started crying. But yo, Robert, if you are running for president, you got my vote, okay? but you know, what you say is really true, because we are living in a time that I never thought that I would ever see.
No.
Because like for me, like I'm sure you've seen Blade, right? Like I've seen
Blade opening night. I loved it.
Right, and I love the first one, and I haven't seen the second one, but I've seen the third one, and I like that one as well. But for me, I saw a superhero that I could relate to, because I saw someone that looked like me.
Right.
But I think that when Black Panther came out, well, first time when I saw Black Panther in Civil War, I was like, yo, you guys, you don't even understand how important this is. Him facing off against the Winter Soldier, like that was like, yo, like when have we seen that?
No,
the thing,
we haven't.
The things that the MCU is doing right now is the most unprecedented things that I think we would never see. And then the fact that we get a Black Panther movie that literally broke $1 billion, and I'm like, I thought I would never see that. And I was talking to some actors that I know, and I was just basically telling them, I was like, most movies that are heavily Afrocentric, Black centric are stories about us being in the hood or us killing people and all this other stuff. And don't get me wrong, to a degree, some of them are compelling, but that's not what we represent, guys. Like, we're not scary people. But when we saw Black Panther, and literally every character, with each character that either had a speaking role or not a speaking role, were treated like kings and queens. They treated each other like, yo, you are a human being and you should be proud of the color of your skin. And I was just like, we want more. I, as an individual, would love that, want more of that. And I wanted to ask you, because you basically touched on it, do you think in the near future, because we did get, which is an amazing, funny film that I love, how many, do you think we'll get more superhero-centric, Black-centric heroes in the next upcoming movies? Like, I'm a huge fan of Static Shock. I would love to see him on TV. Or movies. I'm a huge
the whole Icon universe that Dwayne McDuffie created. Icon, the character Icon, Static, that all came from the Milestone universe.
Right.
And I would love to see more of that stuff. I have every issue of the Milestone comics. I love those characters. I think here's the thing. Again, human beings, we're not the most advanced thinkers. We're too apt. I've always looked at it this way. Like, I grew up as a Star Trek fan. Like, my first crush was Lieutenant Uhura, Nichelle Nichols. Mm-hmm. Now, when I was a little kid growing up in Seattle, there wasn't a whole lot of racial diversity where I was from. But in my mind, Nichelle Nichols was like the first woman I thought, like, oh man, she's really beautiful. Mm-hmm. But I didn't think of her as Black. I just thought of her as Lieutenant Uhura. Like, that's the way she looked. And there's an episode called Mirror Mirror where she's wearing she has an exposed midriff, and she was so sexy. Mm-hmm. She slinks around the bridge because she's in the evil universe and stuff. Mm-hmm. And it didn't occur to me until later in life, when I was older. I heard somebody say something. I heard somebody was saying horrible things about Black people. Mm-hmm. And it was like the first time I was like 8. And I really had a hard time with it. And I remember talking to my mom about it. I'm like, I don't understand. Like, I don't get it. Because my first experience was like Lieutenant Uhura and I didn't get the difference, because there were just different kinds of people. And on Star Trek, like Dr. Daystrom, who invented William Marshall, who invented the Duotronic computers on the Enterprise, who was also in the movie Blackula. William Marshall was a Black actor, and he was this smart guy. He went a little crazy with his computer technology on Star Trek. But so it was just, that's the way people looked to me. And on Star Trek, everybody on Star Trek was smart, and they were all, and there was never, the only time they ever touched on racism once was a character didn't like a Vulcan. Vulcan may have been a Romulan, and and Kirk even says there's no place for bigotry on the bridge. Flat out says it in the episode.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the episode where the people are white, Let That Be Your Last Battlefield from the 3rd season, people are white on one side and Black on the other. And then the people that are white on the other side were prejudiced against. It was so silly to me. So I never understood that. Mm-hmm. And as I got older, and I still never understood it. Like, I went to South Korea last year for the first time working on a documentary project. And I understood by the way, the South Koreans were very nice, but as a tall white dude, there were no, you walk down the street in South Korea, it's all pretty homogenized. There's no white dudes walking around. Everywhere I went, people were looking funny at me. Like, what was I going to do? And I'm like, oh, this is what it feels like to be an alien. And it's racism as I got older seems so silly to me, because it just depends on what region of the world your genetic stock comes from. Africa is a hotter, more arid environment. So evolutionarily speaking, people who lived in Africa developed more melanin in their skin to protect them from the rays of the sun. And as we moved northern and we went eastward, Asians are Asians again because of the region they come from. Just like we got whiter and whiter as we moved up into the Northern European environment, we have again the people that are from Central, South, and even Native American cultures here in America. Again, it was all because of our genetic evolutionary makeup based on where we were on the planet Earth, which to me, I'm like, but we're all the same. Like the fact that we can intermarry and still have kids together, we're all the same species. I mean, I'll tell you what, I've always said this. If the aliens invade Earth, all humans are at risk. Like, no one's going to sit there and go, oh man, I ain't going to get into this foxhole because like that dude's Vietnamese, you know, and my father went to Vietnam and fought against the North Vietnamese. No, you're all going to be diving away from alien energy weapons and you're going to be huddling together and we're all going to be human beings. We're all in this together. And if we go out to the stars, eventually, if we make it that far, what do you think's going to happen? We're going to meet an alien race for the first time, hopefully. And I can't wait for that first conversation when we're talking to some weird plant-like thing with 1,000 eyes. We're trying to explain to that alien about racial differences on the planet Earth. And the plant-like alien's going to go, I don't know, man. You human beings all look alike to me. I don't know what to say. You know, and it's such a bizarre thing. But back to your question, I think, look, Black Panther proved that a black superhero with a predominantly black supporting cast and the nation of Wakanda, which is the most technologically advanced. I mean, how many racists in America are like, I can't believe they made the most technologically advanced nation on earth full of black people. I mean, you can just imagine there's people that are still stewing about Black Panther, but secretly they love it. It just doesn't jibe with their racial beliefs. I mean, I think we're going to see absolutely more characters because Black Panther also translated internationally. You know, traditionally, black films wouldn't translate as well internationally, like Star Trek never traveled internationally either. But we're going to see more and more of that, and we're going to see more and more representation. Now that Marvel's going to do Shang-Chi, they're going to have their first Asian lead. I was a huge fan of Shang-Chi growing up, especially the Doug Mensch, Paul Gulacy run. But then again, you know, I watched Asian movies all the time. I grew up watching Asian cinema. One of my favorite. I love Chow Yun-fat and Tony Leung and John Woo's movie Hard Boiled. They were awesome. Like I'd want to be like both of those dudes. And so I think we're going to get, look, as the world gets more evolved and we see more and more the fact that really we're really not that much different. Everybody wants to take care of themselves and their families and their kids and get educated. And I mean, I really think that we should start a UN operation where we just have people come and have meals. We take all the different disparate people on the earth and we have like, we'll get 10 different people from different races or regions of the planet and they get to make dinner, you know, and like we bring in a bunch of people and we just sit down and sample the food because I've traveled quite a bit. And I'll tell you something, wherever you go, the one constant in the universe is that people are pretty nice and everybody wants to show you their culture. And when you sit down and have a meal with somebody, it doesn't matter what your background is, what you look like. Everyone's there to have a good time and have a good bite to eat. And that is a unifying force. And we need to do more of that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, man. And it's funny that you say that because like, you know, it's funny. I watched Star Trek. I wasn't a huge fan, but I kind of like the Patrick Stewart run of Star Trek.
Sure. The Next Generation.
And you know, yeah, the Next Generation. It escaped my mind, but you just reminded me, and it's the cool characters that I really liked were the aliens.
Yeah,
and, you know, it's funny, like the people who were humans treated the aliens like they were actually humans, and it was like, in a sense, you know, and I could be looking at this all wrong, but you know, it was really cool to see the aliens teaching the humans something new, or where Patrick Stewart didn't know something and he had to run to someone who was completely a different being from him to ask him for help or ask them for help. And it was really cool to see. And I wish that most people had that lens of like, listen, granted, we may be all different colors, but hey, we are all the same. Point blank, period. Like that's all we are. And you know what's funny? I wanted to ask you, because I know you are very seasoned in the Hollywood industry in terms of your producing and editing. I just wanted to know, like, because you told us how you got started, but what was your first job? Like what did you do? What was the first? What was that thing that got your foot in the door? Because
it was working on so on Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, which was my first movie job. I was what's called a production assistant, which is the lowest of the low. Basically, a production assistant is what's called I don't know if they still use the word gopher.
Mm-hmm.
When I was working for my dad, you go for this, you go for that, go for. But a production assistant is somebody. I was working for the art department.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give you an example. Like here's my first day on the job. I'd never worked on a movie before. I go to work. I got hired by, I knew a friend of a friend.
Mm-hmm.
I got this job, just got out of film school. The first day on the job, I get handed 2 pairs of keys. Mm-hmm. One was to a van and one was to a big pickup truck, a Ford Dually pickup truck. Mm-hmm. They handed me $10,000 in cash. Mm-hmm. And then they handed me a list of stuff that because the art department, we are in charge of building all the sets. And on Leatherface, we built a farmhouse on the hills on location behind Magic Mountain, which is an amusement park here. And then we had to build a fake gas station in a place called Palmdale. So everything that we needed, I had to get lumber and paint and all kinds of crazy stuff. And they told me, don't come back until you have everything on that list and bring us receipts. And one of the things that was on that list, I've told this story a lot, but it bears repeating, was I had to get "Don't Mess with Texas" bumper stickers. And I'm like, this is California. Where am I going to get? And everybody else was busy. And I knew, I'm like, I can't go ask somebody. I'm like, where do you get "Don't Mess with Texas"? This was my job. It was like a test. I had to figure out, and there was no internet back then. I couldn't like Google. I'm like, okay, well, where do they have bumper stickers anyway? And I was thinking, well, a truck stop. There's truck stops everywhere. So I looked in the phone book, and there happened to be, it was like, I don't know, 30 miles away from the production office. There was a huge truck stop where you could stay overnight. They had a diner there and a gift shop. So I drove out to the truck stop. And sure enough, they had hundreds of bumper stickers. And sure enough, they didn't just have "Don't Mess with Texas" bumper stickers. They had like 4 different kinds with different fonts and colors. So I just bought them all. I bought all the "Don't Mess with Texas" bumper stickers. And I bought everything else. I had to go get paint and lumber and stuff. So I come back to the production office after I've been driving all day, 12 hours running around all over LA looking for stuff. I come back and I bring everything. I unload it all, and there it all is. And for them, it's par for the course. They just expect somebody to know what they're doing. This is my first job. I've never worked on a movie. They're testing me, and I lay down. The production designer's name was Mick Strawn. He's still alive. He's my Facebook friend. And I remember putting down all 4 of the different "Don't Mess with Texas" bumper stickers, and there's way too many. Like they would never. But he looks at me and goes, "That's great. That's terrific." Because they were testing me to see what I would come up with. And after that night, Mick Strawn says, "Okay, you can come back tomorrow." And that was my first job. That was my first day in the entertainment industry. And it required, I had to have a head on my shoulders. I had to know what I was doing, because in another thing about the entertainment business that people won't tell you, especially when you're in production, movie making, you can literally figure out how much each second costs, because you work a 12-hour day on a set. It's a 12-hour day, right? Let's say you're working for, I don't know, you're shooting for, say, 30 days, and your budget is, I don't know, $10 million. So, and 33% of that goes to post. But so you can actually figure out, so you've got, let's say, I don't know, $6,300,000 to shoot the movie. That means you can figure out, you've got 30 days, you've got 12 hours a day. You can actually calculate how much each second costs. Each second might cost $20. That means every 10 seconds you spend $2,000 or whatever, $200. They don't suffer fools gladly in the movie business. If I had not had those "Don't Mess with Texas" bumper stickers, I would have wasted someone's time, and I wouldn't have made it. So it really I had to show initiative, and I had to show ingenuity. And frequently when you're working on movies, especially in the art department, when you're building things from scratch or making it up sometimes, you have to be smart. And I was lucky that I was able to bring to bear all of my education and the fact that I was always a pretty independently minded kid, without the benefit of modern technology that we have now. I mean, I can't imagine what it would be like to be a PA and have a smartphone. It'd take you 5 minutes. You'd be like, I don't know where to get that. But it was different 30 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Actually, it was 30 years ago this year. This is my 30th anniversary as an industry professional. And
Oh,
while I
wow.
haven't had the great success of a lot of people, I've still been able to produce movies and direct movies, and I'm making a movie now, and I've been kicking around and talking on YouTube. So it still works out. But yeah, that's how I started. That's how I got my foot in the door. And the interesting thing is, once you've worked with somebody and they like you, part of the motion picture business, it's not just what you know or who you know. It's how great are you to work with? Are you easy to work with? People want to work. The movie business is the hours are long, and it's very tense and pressure filled. You got to work with people that you like and that you have fun with. So it's not just enough to be good at what you're doing, and it's not just enough to be smart. You have to really know your people skills, and you have to like people and get along with people. That's a big part of it.
Yo, that is very interesting and a very good good advice for me, because I plan on at some point in my life to venture into the movie / TV realm, because I've done a couple short films on my YouTube channel, and I want to do it professionally. And to hear you say what you just told me, it's like, granted we're in a more advanced time now than we were then. It's kind of easy. It's not necessarily easier, but kind of you can make that effort to put out a short film on YouTube. And I used to hear Jon Schnepp say all the time, listen, just do it. Just do it. Make your film, put it out there, and do it again. And then if you continuously to do it, you will get that recognition. And that's kind of how this whole YouTube thing came for me as well. And I wanted to ask you, I have two more questions to ask you, but
sure.
The question I wanted to ask you is that you have been very vibrant and you were actually one of my favorite characters on the Schmoedown. I wanted to ask you, since you left that sorry team that I don't.
They locked me in a room.
Right. And now you're a part of this amazing team with Andrew Guy. I just want to know, man, how much of that is really scripted, and how much of that is actually you? Like,
well, I'll tell you, none of it is scripted.
Really?
Well, I'll tell you something. I have never been handed a script for any of it. And here it's sort of interesting. When I first started doing the Schmoedown, it was like, I don't know, 3-4 years ago now, or when I first started doing it, was this fun little lark that we were doing. Mm-hmm. Now it's a lot more serious. Mm-hmm. Everybody studies hard. Like I could compete at first because my knowledge was competitive, but now people are actually studying. Like I don't have time to study. I mean, I know what I know, but no. So the Christian does come up with ideas for storylines, but he'll just come up to me and he goes, like, first of all, he said, I didn't really follow wrestling, so I didn't know what a heel was. Mm-hmm. So I had to be told, I'm like, oh, I want to do that. Mm-hmm. Like I want to be a heel. Mm-hmm. And I want to yell and scream. And I had at first I was just wearing t-shirts or geeky t-shirts or whatever, but I had this jacket I had from a costume like 15 years ago. I'd never worn it since. I'm like, I'm gonna wear this jacket. Like I didn't know who Ric Flair was from the wrestling world. Mm-hmm. And I figured Christian told me about it. I started just being this rambunctious persona. and I Christian would basically say, okay, here's the idea. The idea is this. And he would give me like one sentence. Mm-hmm. Of what his idea was. And mm-hmm. I'm like, okay. So literally people are making stuff up mm-hmm. they're using their own personalities, but it really is like an improv exercise. Mm-hmm. Like when I mean, he has a direction he wants us to go in, but like we never know. Sure, when Guy threw Bateman on the table, they had to get a table that wasn't gonna hurt somebody.
Right.
So they knew they were going to do that, but they didn't know exactly how it was going to go down. Mm-hmm. Like, again, there's no script. Mm-hmm. Christian Harloff just gives me a vague idea. And then he kind of, and it's really funny because like, I'm not an actor. Like we're not actors, but yet we kind of are. Mm-hmm. Like I'm listed on the IMDb as an actor on the Schmoedown playing the captain, which I think is so funny because I guess we are, but a lot of that stuff, what makes it so much fun is you're playing off somebody else and you don't know what they're going to say. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't know, like, I don't know why I started screaming like, Navarro, I don't know. It just seemed like a good idea at the time. And plus, and it's funny because Hector Navarro is one of the nicest, most knowledgeable guys in the movie pundit space. He's so great. But I loved his name. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to scream Navarro, just because it seems something like it was something fun to do. And so there is a lot of my own personality in it. But they're kind of but when I don't know if it's aired yet, but there was a bit where I was being interviewed in a room, like doing one of the post interviews, and I was like screaming, like really screaming this was a while ago, a couple months ago, and I really thrashed my voice, but I was totally into it. And Harloff is just sitting behind like the cameras and stuff, and he's just laughing his ass off because he doesn't know what we're going to say. And if we say something that's too much, or if I swear too much, he'll back me up and go, okay, we got to do that again. But he doesn't tell me what to do. He doesn't know what he likes to see what's going to happen as much as the next guy. So he sort of engineers the direction of the stories, but there's no scripts. There's no scripts or anything like that. And that's what makes it fun. That's why I like doing it. It was so funny when I was doing a bit with Drew where I was trying to get Drew McWeeny to come join the family to make sure you get a belt. I was like putting my hand on his shoulder and trying to like convince him. I could see in his mind, he's like, what are you saying? I'm like, come with us, because I could see in his eyes that he was bewildered by what I was saying. I mean, he got it, but I think he thought it was so hilarious that he knows he's going to go with me because we're going to start this team, but he has no idea what I'm going to say. He has no idea I was going to put my hand on his shoulder and stuff. And and Andrew Guy and Drew, I like them both as people. They're just great. The funny thing about the Schmoedown is everybody's pretty great. Everyone's really nice. Everyone's having a good time. Everyone's always got a smile on their face. It's a lot of fun to be a part of the Schmoedown. I mean, I can't say enough good things about it. And like, we did that free-for-all. If I just remembered Alan Tudyk's name and I would have had it written down, I would have lasted more than half a round. But it's tough now. I mean, I was with a tough bunch of people. Now those guys are all serious. And they cover movies for a living. I don't do that anymore. So I'm locked away in my edit bay, so they have a lot more knowledge, especially of more modern stuff. My expertise is the 80s and before that.
Yeah, it's funny. I was like, I'm glad you said that because I've been seeing all the fandom of the Schmoedown, and people were like, clearly these people are reading lines. This is all an act, and I'm like, I'm like. I look at Robert and I look at the rest of the Collider crew. Most of these people are not actors.
No, none of them are.
They're not, and I'm like, except for like Roca and Sam Levine. Like that's it. And I'm like, these people are not actors. So I'm glad that you cleared that up, that you guys scripted. I'm glad. And my final question I wanted to ask you.
And by the way, that's what makes it fun. It's fun to see what non-actors will come up with.
Right.
And how they're going to do it. I'm like, what are they going to do? And some people, like Andrew Guy is obviously a very handsome guy, but he's used to being on camera, and same with Bateman. They're charismatic dudes. So, and they love each other. And so to watch them, I'm like, ooh, what are they going to do now that they're going against each other? Like I was there when they filmed the scene where Bateman gets thrown on the table. And I was like, damn, that was awesome.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty awesome too, and I actually thought I didn't see that coming, but I thought it was really pretty surprising as well. But the final question I wanted to ask you, and it's regards to the Schmoedown, like, yo, when are we going to see you back in the Inner Geekdom? We got to see you get that.
Oh chance. Man, it's so God. I look now, and again, it's so everybody's so serious about it now, and I don't think I could beat Rachel Cushing. My whole thing is I don't know Harry Potter. I'd have to go back and watch all the Harry Potter movies. Rachel Cushing would smoke my ass. I mean, you talk about Harry Potter, that alone, and Lord of the Rings. I mean, she loves her fantasy. I got my Star Trek. Like I was pissed. I knew James Bond, and then they pulled that in and out of the Inner Geekdom, and I'm like, what? Just because James Bond's for the old guys. I'm like, yes. Give me my James Bond. I know my Bond movies like the back of my hand. Come on. They pulled it away. But yeah, Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings, and I know Lord of the Rings, but The Hobbit, I'd have to go back and study. I mean, I'd like to do it again. What I really want to do is take Jason Inman on and Scott Mantz in a Star Trek round. That's what I want to do.
Oh, that I would love that.
Yeah.
That would be amazing because they have the Star Wars Schmoedown. I would love to see a Star Trek Schmoedown.
Yeah, me too. Me
Now that
too.
would be amazing. But Robert, I want to thank you so much for being a part of the show. This is one of my favorite interviews that I've done. I've done multiple interviews, and I'm so glad that I got the co-host of the John Campion Show on my show. Like this is mind blowing for me. And where can the people find you on social media?
Well, first of all, I want to say thanks for reaching out, and asking me to do this because, what you're doing is great and you got to keep doing it. And I think what's awesome about modern technology is you can reach out and talk to people. And I like the fact that you actually did it. You did this, you made your own channel, you're out there making the work. And look, nothing is going to come if you just sit at home and do nothing, but you're out there making it happen. And who knows where you're going to be in 5 or 10 years. Ruling the planet Earth.
Hopefully, I'll be at the Schmoedown facing off against one of you guys.
Oh yeah, we'd love that. But no, you can find me on Twitter at Burnett RM. You can find me on Instagram at RM Burnett. Find me on my own YouTube channel, The Burnett Work, or my website, theburnettwork.net. You can find, if you want to contact me too, that's a great place to do it.
Awesome. And once again, I want to thank you for being a part of this show. If you guys haven't already, go follow Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett. He does have his own YouTube show. What is it called?
Robservations.
Robservations.
A show about something.
Yes, I've seen it, and you tackle a lot of interesting topics. I remember when you first started to announce it on Twitter, and I was like, "Yo, this is going to be something completely different that I'm going to love to see." And if anyone who's a fan of Robert and the whole Collider / AMC / John Campion crew, you definitely want to go see this show. Thank you guys.
That.
Oh, anytime, Robert. But thank you guys for watching this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe to all of my YouTube videos / different things that I'm doing here on Multimedia. And you guys have a great day. Thank you guys for watching this video. Go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube page to get more exclusive content coming from my YouTube channel. And if you want to watch my previous videos, go ahead and click on this video up here or this video down here, where you get to see more exclusive content coming from my channel. Thank you guys for watching this video, and you guys have a blessed day.